All right. Hey, everybody. It's Will McGee, and I am being joined with Andrea Rishmawi. She is one of my favorite recruiters of all time. If she's not excited to talk to every single candidate and client that she possibly can, she's often with her dog and her on her boat, chilling in Las Vegas, living the life. But obviously, everybody is kind of struggling right now indoors. So I was able to get her from her busy schedule to come talk to you guys. So I'll let Andrea basically introduce yourself and tell people about you.
Hey, thanks, Will. Yeah, the indoor thing is rough right now. I'm not going to lie. They've actually closed the lake down, literally. Like, so we can't even go on the lake to like relax. Been doing a lot of puzzles, and I've become a sourdough master, like everybody else on the internet. So, I've known I've known you for a long time. I think since I started recruiting, so maybe 8 or 10 years ago, something like that. She's nuts. We worked together at 2 different agencies, and we've both kind of been in the same space for a really long time, I think, in terms of working with tech companies, mainly helping them to do important hires. But what I think the unique thing and the reason that we relate a lot to each other is twofold. The first is, I think, in terms of your character and the way that you treat people, I think you and I are always on the same page about that, about really caring about people's needs, and putting your clients' needs and your candidates' needs first. And it's very rare to find in a recruiter. And then the other thing, obviously, is we both are big into the law of attraction and visualization, and kind of live our lives with a super positive outlook that affects and leaks into every part of everything.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. I'm hoping it leaks into my hair after this, because I
Good luck with that.
It was thinning, and I had to go into this this COVID-19 look, the 2020 trend. So
I have to tell you, I got a very bad haircut right before quarantine, and I was like, fantastic. By the time that we get out, it'll be all grown out. This is amazing.
Oh, man.
I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of really positive things also about quarantine. If you want to pause for a second and talk about that,
totally. I mean, we are seeing one of the first times in our history. I don't think my parents have ever experienced anything like this, where literally everyone is stuck inside, and you're going to have to deal with some of the shit that you've been putting off for so long, whether that be on a personal level or your relationship or whatever. There's going to be a lot of interesting things that come out of this. So yeah, I think there's a lot of positive.
I'm also having, look, I want to kind of go back and say, I don't love quarantine, right? If we didn't have to be doing it, that would be better. I also don't love thousands of people dying. Yeah. That all being said, I'm really trying to find the good in it. And I'm having much deeper, more meaningful conversations with every single candidate and every single client that I'm talking to. 100%. Also, a lot more strategy and more strategic conversations. And then in general, it's just easier to get a hold of people, which has been really nice, doing a lot more video calls. And then I'm sure on a personal level, I would assume this is the same for you, but I have been reconnecting with people that I've been meaning to reconnect with for months, sometimes years, just like video calls. And I'm saving a ton of money on happy hours as well.
Oh. So the amount of money we're saving is insane. I'm not going to even lie. Not even just out of necessity. It's just we're not spending shit right now. So
right, yeah.
We're definitely saving a lot. And to the point of talking to people, I honestly haven't had as many conversations with my parents as I should be having, or should have been having over the years. But now I'm talking to them almost every day. So it's kind of a benefit. And I know my parents are really happy. So
I'm talking to my brothers way more. I usually talk to my brothers once a year on Christmas, a hello, Merry Christmas. They get a happy birthday text. We're just not close. We live across the country. We live very, very different lives. And we've been in group chats and group texts, and we're FaceTiming. So like I said, there's, I think, some positive things to come away from it. We've definitely, I feel like things are much simpler right now. And I hope, for me, what I take away from this and what others can take away from it is that life doesn't always have to be so stressed out and busy. The slowing down has been really nice, and I'm trying to appreciate it. Sometimes it's too much and I'm dying to go do something, but I've been dropping off sourdough loaves at everybody's house, so it's fine.
I haven't gotten one. Where's mine?
Yeah. So it'll be a long drive.
I know, right? So let's get right into it. you and I had a bit of a talk before this, obviously, and we've been chatting about like kind of what we wanted to go over. So, you know, like you had mentioned that one of your superpowers is really all about this this idea of transparency. And we kind of touched on it a little bit even in this intro, but like of being just really open and honest with your clients and your candidates. And I was hoping you could just kind of go into details about some of the things that you're doing and how like your superpower has affected your business and what you tell your clients at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think we take who we are in real life and we apply it to work, right? Even if we don't mean to. So I'm sure everybody has that friend, and then you have that friend who you call when you want honesty, and sometimes brutal honesty, right? I'm that person for my friends. And there's a joke around our house that Josh, my partner of 10 years, calls me the relationship Grim Reaper, because when I see one of my friends in a relationship that I can tell is unhealthy, or that they're being treated poorly, or that they're unhappy and they don't want to admit it yet, I find a tiny little crack in that relationship and I get a chisel and a hammer and I break that thing wide open, because I don't want them wasting their time on something that's not going to work out. Or at the very least, if they're not going to attempt, you have to fix it now before it becomes a bigger and bigger issue. So that's how I guess how I recruit as well, and how I work with candidates and with clients, from the very first conversation. So when I'm talking to candidates and doing kind of an early on pre-screen conversation, it's not, do you fit this job? Here's a job description. Do you like it? It's, talk to me about what you've done throughout your career, and poking holes in that and understanding, hey, you said you built this. Is that you, or is that a team? And I want what I'm trying to get across on that first call is, you need to be honest with me so that I can be honest with you, and we can have a very candid, open, transparent relationship. And so, once the candidate starts opening up to me about that, one of the things I really dive into with them is, what do you want to do next? And this is kind of my process around recruiting, but I don't ever talk about the opportunity until I get to know a candidate and I know what they want.
Yeah.
And the reason behind that is simply like, if they know that it's a 50-person startup and the job is this, and I say, well, what are you looking for? Well, they're going to say exactly that, right? Because they want to fit themselves into this job. And my opinion is, tell me what you really, really want at the core of things. Is it a company size? Is it the type of work that you're doing? Is it a growth opportunity? What are the things you actually care about? And I always use the analogy of, you've seen the movie Weird Science, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Weird Science. Amazing.
So I tell this to clients and I tell it to candidates. I say, I want you to weird science this for me. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a movie from the late 80s, early 90s. Yeah. With, I don't remember the actors in it, but they'd essentially create their dream girl on a computer program, right? And she comes to life. And I say, weird science this for me, right? If you had your druthers, by the way, I'm bringing the word druthers back in 2020. What does your perfect job, company, candidate, whoever I'm talking to, what does that look like for you? And then we talk about why that's important to them. Because once I understand that, then we can say, okay, let's see if this opportunity has any of that. And if it's just one small piece or it's every single piece, then we can kind of talk through it and see, can they see themselves here for the next kind of 3 to 5 years? So that level of transparency, the reason I think people don't dive into it is, one, can be a little emotionally exhausting. But I think the other reason is, recruiters want the candidate to fit the job, right? And you have to be honest enough with them to say, hey, listen, I actually don't think this is a great match, and here's why. And it's not that I don't show them the opportunity. I'll say, I'm going to share the opportunity with you. Here's what you told me. Here's what this is. If you can reconcile those things, fine. But I'd really rather get you into something you're really, really excited about and that is going to set you up for success. And I think that level of honesty you have to have.
Yeah, especially on the candidate side. Like, if you're a candidate looking for a job, there are a lot of predatorial recruiters out there that don't necessarily look out.
I won't name names, but
we're not going to name any of them. But, they're not necessarily looking out for your best interest. So it's understandable to be reserved, especially until someone's proven themselves a little bit. But I think that's also a big, I was talking to Mari last week and we were talking about rapport building. And like, I think that transparency on the recruiter side, just being like, I can't tell you how many times I've told a candidate, like, I just don't think this is the right fit for you at all. I'll tell you about it if you really want to know, but like, based on what we just chatted about, like about what you're looking for, I don't think we should submit you over there. Let's look at something else, even though they would have totally been a placement, right? Like,
Yeah.
because like it is one of those things where if you're not being very honest and open from the beginning, and you put someone in a position where they're now going through the motions just to get you the opportunity, I'm going to be the one that hurts at the end, because my reputation's destroyed for my client side, and then on the candidate side, they just got placed in a position where they're not excited or happy about, right? Like those deals don't last for very long, right? So
reputation is the key word that you just used there. So I'm a big believer, as you know, and this is a wild thing, but I don't do any business development. So I don't do cold calls or cold mails. I don't do candidate marketing. I let clients come to me, which is part visualization, I think, but also partly I'm at a point in my career where I built my career this way. This is how I run my business since day one. I take care of people. I tell candidates all the time, this is a bigger decision in your life than it is in mine. This is not about me getting a placement, right? Like, if this isn't right for you and you have concerns, we need to talk through those now, because if you don't work out, my reputation is also at stake, right? And so helping candidates to understand that you're on their team. It's hard when you and I talked earlier about kind of when people get desperate, right? And I think people being laid off right now, et cetera, there are a lot more people in the market than there usually are. And when people become desperate, their priorities go out the window and they just want a job. And you have to stop with them and say, hey, listen, let's talk about why it's really important you don't just take any job right now.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Because 6 months from now, you're going to be out of there, whether you leave or they fire you or whatever the reason is. Things are going to go back to normal, and it's not, honestly, outside of COVID, coronavirus, whatever, this happens all the time, right? People just, for many, many reasons, they feel desperate, whether they're not working or they just really need to get out of the environment that they're in. So they'll take anything. And that's how you start the pattern of job hopping. And you and I both know that can be detrimental to your career.
Oh yeah, job hopping, and like I have a candidate right now, and I love this candidate. He's one of the most awesome people I know in the software engineering field. Very sociable, very good guy, just a good heart. But he made some unfortunate decisions. Right, he made a decision to jump onto the wrong startup, and then out of desperation jumped into another startup, and then now he's back on the market again. And now it's become a rolling pattern for him, and it puts him in a category of I'm not going to be able to get you a permanent role. So luckily, I think this market is going to shift towards a more contract-based business, right? We're going to see more project-based work coming out of it. He'll be fine in this market because of it, because he can jump in and out of those contracts, but it's going to take some time for him to find that next role because of the desperation, right? Because of it being I just need whatever offer I got, I'm going to take, right?
I will say it does lean in both directions though, right? So on the other side of the spectrum, you get candidates who can't make a decision because they want something to be perfect. But it just goes back to really calling people out on their garbage, right? So one of the first questions, when we're talking with somebody is, what's the reason that you're looking for a new role? And if you don't get to the bottom of that reason, if you don't get to the real answer, 90% of people are going to say, well, I just want to see what else is out there. Well, I've been in a relationship for 10 years and I'm not on Tinder. I'm not looking to see what else is out there because I'm happy, right? So my question for people is, what is the real thing that's going on that's causing you to say, I don't want to be here for the foreseeable future? And so sometimes what happens is we see that job junkie, but on the other side of the spectrum, people will be kind of paralysis by analysis, right? When they're trying to leave a company, and that being honest with them and calling them out and saying, listen, here's your list of things that you're looking for. Here's the list of things that this company has. Like, there's something else going on in your life that's making you not want to make that move.
Mm-hmm.
What's causing that trepidation and that hesitation? And if you've built a real relationship by being honest with people, I think you're able to do that. If you haven't been honest with them and they don't trust you, you're not able to say things like that.
No, not at all. So let's flip it to the client side. I mean, we all have dealt with a client or two or many, like, just doesn't get the market, right? So, and it's one of those things where, like, I find really interesting with a lot of recruiters, because you can either be, in my perspective, you can either be a really strong recruiter or you can be an order taker. And if you're an order taker, then your job becomes excruciatingly hard. Like, it becomes one of those things where you're climbing up hills all day long, trying to get a deal done or trying to get a placement in. And if you're internal, oh my God, like, if you don't know what you're talking about, or if you're in a position where you don't have the data or the research to back up an argument, and you have to go to your hiring manager and tell them, like, they're wrong, but you don't have anything behind it, like, it becomes really hard. You just kind of fall back to, I'm just going to do whatever you tell me to, and then we'll see what happens. And, like, I've seen a lot of internal recruiters just give up and just go, you know what, I'm just going to post the job, and then whatever candidates come, they come. And then if the hiring manager comes to me, I'll just let them know that this candidate hasn't applied or doesn't exist anymore. And it's like, well, what do you do from there? Like, what's your thoughts on the client side? Transparency.
So here's the issue with transparency from a service provider standpoint. Every recruiter is vying for business. And in the world of being a service provider, your customer is always right. Right. So I think that's where the hesitance comes. People also are really afraid to be honest because they don't want to be difficult to work with. So recruiting, there is a very low barrier to entry, right? It's like used car sales or something. Like, it's real estate as well, right? We all know amazing real estate agents who really listen and show you only the houses they know you're going to love. And then we know real estate agents who are, just trying to sell you a house, and they're not telling you that the foundation is cracked or whatever. So it's being confident enough in your knowledge and your abilities to be honest with the client. When I do an intake on a new client and a new job, I tell them from the very beginning, this is who I am and this is how I'm going to work with you. Your priorities are very important to me, but if you're being unrealistic, I'm going to have to be honest with you and tell you that the list of things that you've just given me for a candidate are awesome, and I can absolutely find that person, but you're paying $70,000 below market. Yeah. So you're going to decide you're either going to decide which two qualities are important, or you're going to up your budget. Like, they're showing a client from the beginning that you plan to be honest with them and that you are competent enough to have the answers, I guess, is a better way to put it. I think sometimes people are scared, right? They're scared to share that information, or if you're early in your career, you may not know it. But that sets the tone for the relationship. Yeah. Just like it does with a candidate, letting them know, what you're great at from the beginning, but hey, we're going to struggle here, here, and here. I think that's that also the kind of honesty they want to see. It's tough to push back on clients when you are a service provider, because that there are a million other people who are willing to stand in your place. And I think you have to earn that trust with clients, and you have to earn the ability to be open and honest with them. So it's a bit different than on the candidate side. Yeah.
So with everything that's going on, what's your thoughts on the current state of recruiting, and, like, how is this affecting kind of your business and your ability to be transparent, and what needs to kind of happen in this space?
So the great thing is, everyone is going through this together. And everyone candidates and clients have been more understanding than I've ever seen, which is great. Yeah. I talked to, right as this was happening, I reached out to all of my clients and I said, hey, here's where we are today. Some of your businesses are going to be severely impacted, and you're going to have to go into a hiring freeze. If you don't have to go into a hiring freeze, if you have the wherewithal, the bandwidth, if you have the funds, now is the time to hire. You're going to find really amazing talent on the market. whether they've been laid off. But more often what I'm seeing, actually, it's not that people have been laid off and are looking, it's that it's making them question what kind of company do they want to really be with, right? They may not have had time before because they were so busy in the office, and now they're working from home. We're also seeing how companies are treating people, and companies that aren't taking care of their employees, they're going to have a whole lot fewer employees when this thing is over.
Yep.
So, what I told my clients is, if you are able to hire right now, now is the time to pick up amazing talent. And if you're not able to, understand that as well, but we should be having conversations with candidates about you for the future, right? And just kind of letting them know that I'm here for them when they're ready to turn the faucet on. We've also been talking a bit about contract and how can they supplement their business with contract employees for the people that they have had to lay off, or will have to lay off in the future, and hey, to avoid something like this in the future, can we hire contract for things that make a little bit more sense to have, hired guns for?
Absolutely. And I think there's a big part of that contract business is like you said, a lot of the people that are being laid off aren't necessarily, there's going to be a lot of great candidates coming out of it for sure. But, what's the reality is it's going to be a lot of junior candidates. It's going to be a lot of people that were just hired. They're like, a lot of times they might, like a lot of these high growth unicorn startups, they're just hiring to get to the number that they need to get to show growth. And they're not like, there's a lot of that stuff going on that was going on. And now it's like, okay, now we got to cut these underperformers or whatever it might be. Those are a lot of the people that are going to be in that situation are going to be in this desperation moment too. So they're going to be trying to find a job as fast as possible because they got a kid, they've got, their mom on their health care or whatever it might be. They need to get back into the system. So with the combination of those two things, you're going to see I guarantee we're going to see a lot of people coming in out of desperation and going out once it gets back to normal. So one thing that we're actually advising is contract to hire. So that way you both are on the same page, right?
Yeah.
You're not in a situation where, you get somebody who is a bit of an iffy fit and then it's good while it's remote, but when they come into the office, it just doesn't vibe well, right? That can also be a situation. So, just to make sure that everyone's protected and you get this kind of, mutual beneficial relationship, the candidate's getting paid, they can get on, especially if they're in California, they get on the insurance, and on the client side, your projects are getting done and you're not missing a beat. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think contract to hire is great. And I also think you touched on a point that I think is important to talk about, which is the culture fit. So many companies that we work with will love a candidate technically, or they'll think they can do this job, they're great, but we're not sure if they're a culture fit. And I think that the phrase culture fit rather, can be synonymous with a homogenous culture.
Yes.
And
100%.
It's really tough. And I think that going back to transparency here for a minute, and I think that's going to be the theme, obviously, of everything we're talking about today, but that's something that I push back a lot with clients. And I say, listen, when you talk about a culture fit, I need you to define that for me. And what does that mean? The idea behind culture, what it should be, in my opinion, is if you get 20 people all from the same background, the same race, gender, whatever you want to call it, they're all going to have the same point of view. They're all going to, or more or less the same point of view, right? I don't want to be so
broad strokes.
Yeah, broad strokes, but that same point of view. They're going to try to solve problems the same way. I grew up in a multicultural household. I know that you did as well. And I look at things very different than other people who have a different background than I do. And so that's the beauty of creating a culture, right? You create the culture around your core values, but culture and diversity are very, very different than that. And I think sometimes, especially in small startups, they think, let's just hire a bunch of people who all look and act the same. Yeah. And the problem is that they're never going to solve bigger problems because everyone has the same worldview.
And even I don't even think companies are necessarily looking at I want to hire somebody who looks like me, right? But as a brown person, yeah, it does happen. I'm not saying, but I'm saying I'm not saying most of the time they're not consciously going, I genuinely believe that most companies aren't consciously looking at it and going like, I just want to hire a white Anglo-Saxon male. Like, you know, like that's not like what I don't see that. But when like, there was a really good article that basically said, if you're looking at candidates and your key as a culture, to create a diverse culture, and your key differentiator or your key indicator for a good a candidate is their, you know, degree and specifically like coming from a certain school. Like the reality is that, you know, a lot of Black and brown people didn't have that ability to go to those schools. They may have learned from a, you know, General Assembly or something like that, right? And they got that experience through various different means. Doesn't mean that, like, because they don't necessarily think exactly how they learned at Berkeley engineering school, that they're not going to be a good fit for your company. Because like you said, the culture aspect of it is really more based on values, right? So like,
Yeah.
how you build out your value system or even your train of thought, that's fine. Like, as long as there's somebody who comes in with an open mind or understanding and is willing to learn and develop, and you can grow them, it's a longer it's a longer cycle for sure, but you're going to be better off in the long run. So
Yeah. I will say it's interesting you mentioned General Assembly. I do think that computer science is one type of degree that does make it. So there are a couple different degrees. I tell like younger like family members or family friends or whatever that are in college now and they're trying to figure out what their major is. I say, listen, if you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a doctor, or you're going to be a software engineer, maybe one or two other professions, your degree really matters, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to be a software engineer, get a computer science degree, because learning the building blocks of computer science,
yes.
you will build very, very differently than somebody who is taught themselves. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, okay? Mark Zuckerberg, sure, whatever. On the whole, computer science building blocks are important. But anybody else, you know, if you're going to go into sales or business, there's so many functions that exist in the world today that simply didn't when 50 years ago, that just get a degree that shows that that you can complete something for 4 years, you're going to learn the basics of business, etc. And I'd even go as far as to say, if you plan to live an unconventional life, a degree is not that important.
Yeah.
However, if you want to live a conventional life and you want to get into a standard company and get promoted and do X, Y, and Z, then having a degree is important. And it's okay to go in either direction, but don't expect to have traditional conventional success at where you are an employee of another company without it.
I think that's more on the candidate front, but what I'm saying is, like, on the client side, like when a client totes diversity as a necessity for their hiring strategy over the next, 2
no, I agree completely.
So like you can't, like, I think the big thing is, and it's hard to deal with because we fall victim to it too as recruiters. You're going through a resume extremely fast, trying to identify if a candidate is a good fit or not, because you're going to have to go through 70 to 150 different resumes that day for that one role, right? So it's just like, okay, like we gotta do this fast. So being able to identify those people really quickly is a big part, but that's where, like, internal recruiting teams are going to be really important, right? Because your internal recruiting team is going to be better for you to hire diversity, right? Because they're going to be able to look at it, take the time, and be assessed on it at a different level than someone like you or I who's not retained, right? Like, you can't.
Yeah. What's really interesting is I have a client that will only pay recruiting fees if I don't work with this client anymore for this reason, but would only pay recruiting fees if the candidate fell under what they labeled as diverse. So now we're getting into like reverse cultural discrimination, which is a whole other topic. But so yeah, it's interesting, and I think that this whole Corona experience, like I said, people are going to be analyzing what they really want out of a company, the way that they're being treated, and I think that companies are going to have to step up a little bit in order to retain people.
Oh yeah, 100%. So so that actually leads into one of the next questions. What's your thoughts on retention on new hires during the crisis? Like, where does this kind of go? Where do you think?
So are you saying retention in terms of people that are already there today, or you're saying hiring during the crisis?
Both, right? Like, how do you look at your current staff? If let's say you're a small business owner and you have, 10 engineers, and you're going to have to furlough 2 of them just to keep things going, or put a few of them on contract. Like, how do you deal with that retention on your end? Like, what advice would you give the client? And then on the other hand, if I'm still hiring, and just like when we were talking about with the contract to hire aspect, how do you make sure that there's a retention for the new hire that comes on board, right?
Yeah. So going back to transparency, right? I think the companies right now that are playing things close to the chest people are feeling extremely uncertain. And every conversation that I have, that's what people are saying. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I don't know what's going on with my job. The companies that are being honest, and this winning. Yeah. And they're saying, listen, we want to keep people. In order to do that, here's what we have to do. We're going to have to furlough some of you. The rest of you are going to have to take a whatever % pay cut for the foreseeable future. We're doing it at every level. The executive team is doing it. That transparency goes a very long way. And I have talked to candidates who thought that they were interested in leaving, and they said, hey, listen, I see what's going on in my company now, and I want to be here for them the way that they have been here for me. I think that's massive. So that openness and honesty, and I hope that continues after all this is over, because most people at really big companies, they don't feel like there's any transparency, right? There's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of politics. They never know what's going on. And that uncertainty is a given in their life all the time.
I think there's a big distinction too about that too. Like, you can't just be like transparent about, like, transparency doesn't equal you communicating to your team all the time. Cause I think those are 2 different things. Like, you being able to communicate and make people feel happy about where you're working right now is one thing, right? Like, that's like the feel good aspect of your role, of your company, right? Like, you can talk about all the initiatives you're doing and all the things that you want to do to help out in this coronavirus, and like how it makes you feel, for sure. And like, that's definitely going to keep the loyalty in a way. But I really do think people who don't know what's actually happening in the company, and there's no transparency in like what the business is doing, no transparency in like what's actually getting paid out, how we're handling all of our revenue, and like all these things, like that part right there. Like, I can name a few companies that are doing that, and I'm like I talk to candidates on the daily. They're just like, I just don't know. Like, I don't know what's happening.
I mean,
so I really
think
to
add to that, I think it's helping your teams and your employees understand why you're making the decisions that you're
making.
Sharing revenue numbers or whatever it is that, and talking them through it just like anything else in life, right? Yeah. Like, for kids that right now all their parents are home, the kids want to know why their parents are home. Like, I have explained to my dog several times why we are home so much now, and I think he really appreciates that. No,
your dog has humanness, by the way, so I believe that he actually understands.
Yeah, no, but but I will say, like, I think companies that are just saying, listen, here's what's going on, and here's how we're dealing with it. We want you to know what's happening, because there is a lot of uncertainty in the world right now, but please know that, we're making an effort here. Here's how we're choosing to make that effort, whatever. If you have questions, we want you to come talk to us. That small gesture makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. And I would hope, again, that continues after this, and that they see how effective that is. Yeah. In terms of hiring during this time, I've had several hires, during this whole thing, and we're doing virtual onboarding, the whole 9 yards. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for people to feel like they're a team, but just like everybody else is doing the video calls and Zooms and all that. I think we are so lucky that this has happened in 2020 and not in 1987.
Like yeah, exactly.
Look, 100%. How difficult, like, our version of sacrifice right now is doing video calls and like working out in my backyard instead of going to the gym. It's relax, people. It's not that big of a deal. And companies, there are a lot of companies that really struggled with getting everybody up and running in home office settings, and it has a lot to do with where data is stored and all that. But guess what? Everyone's doing it, and it's showing people that it can be done. So you can build culture virtually. I mean, at TEEMA, the agency that I work through, everybody is virtual, and I have very, very strong relationships with people that I've never met. Guess what? I haven't met probably 60 to 70% of my clients in person ever. We've done, and some of them I haven't even video chatted with, but I feel like we we have very, very strong relationships. So technology just allows us to connect with people like we've never been able to do before.
Yeah.
And when you can see your client with a dog ear filter, like there is nothing greater. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, there you go.
I also think this is like a great equalizer. So I've been working from home for 7 years. It's a really funny to see clients and candidates. Yeah. Well, and to see like that everybody's wearing sweats, right? Like 100%. This whole thing, I wrote an article about it on LinkedIn, but this whole thing about like, you got to get dressed up for work and make your bed. I'm like, no, you don't. You're fine. Do it for a week and let's see what happens.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm wearing pants right now, so like at least I got these on. So like we're good. I think there is some benefit to getting dressed up and feeling like $1 million. But I mean, like you said, like we've been working remote for what, 3 years now. So it's like
it's just fun to see my clients and stuff that are like they have this like very professional kind of vibe, and then it's all of a sudden when they're at home, like then their kids are home too, so that's unique, right? Like I've got like 8-year-olds like jumping around in the background of a video chat where we're negotiating salary and equity. So it's a cool thing to see that personal side of somebody that maybe you wouldn't have had access to otherwise.
Yeah, and talking on that, I mean, I think we were talking about the situations with offers right now in this situation, right? It's been just the whole onboarding process is one thing, but like to present an offer right now, and a lot of people are like tight on cash, people are reducing their numbers. Like if you're a small business owner, you still, like you said, want to hire people, but like you don't know how. And what's going on your side? Because we've been hearing quite a bit on ours.
So we've talked, okay, a couple things are happening. First, I think it's hard to accept a job or to offer somebody a job without having met them in person. I think that's hard for people in general. It's something that we're all going to have to get over, but it's difficult, right? Even if it's your final interview and it's just a meet and greet and you have coffee or whatever. We've talked about doing walk and talks, so I've got most of my clients are in New York, right? So we've talked about, listen, bring a coffee from home, walk 6 feet apart, just so you guys can meet in person. And originally that was part of our plan. That has adjusted. We are no longer even considering that, just because some people have to take public transportation and we're not going to put them into that situation. But for example, I have a candidate, I live in Las Vegas, and I have a candidate that I'm looking at for a company in New York who wants to move to New York, and he and I will probably do that just because she's not able to meet him in person. So I'm going to try to do that. With offers in general, let's go back to the original question because I answered half of it and forgot the second half of it.
So yeah, like with offers, how is this all being handled on your side? Like I think you had told me a bit of a story about one of your offers going through, and like the difficulties, especially right now when there's numbers being cut. People don't want to be very honest about what they're making or what they're providing as a client, right? Like how is that working out for you? What are you talking to your clients about?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know that it has much to do with coronavirus, but I'm happy to share the story because it's bananas. In my career, I've only had something like this happen twice, and it's both been in the last 6 months. But I have a client who we were making an offer to. Again, they hadn't, no one's met in person, which is not so abnormal with this because it's a remote sales role. We should come back to talking about sales though and underperformers in this time of downturn. But he goes through the whole interview process. It's a really difficult interview process in general. They're very stringent with who they hire. We get the offer. He accepts the offer. He's good to start. He's supposed to start, kind of 3 or 4 days from when I got this email from the client. And the email from the client says, from the head of HR, who I also hired there, said, we've heard from a reputable source that this candidate does not actually work at the company he says he works at. And I thought, well, that's weird. So rather than kind of call him out and just say, hey, we've heard this information, is it true or not? Because I also have to be cautious about damaging that relationship, right? Because if it's not true, if he does work here and they've just said, hey, we think you're lying, that's a sticky situation to be in as well.
Yeah.
So we started the conversation, and I was partnering with a recruiter on this, right? So I kind of coached her a little bit about how to have the conversation. And she said, hey, you're starting on Monday, want to make sure everything's gone well. Have you put your 2 weeks notice in? And he said, yeah, I put my two weeks notice in a week and a half ago. And she said, okay, so we're going to have to do employment verification now. So I need to gather that information. And he allegedly worked for this really, really big company. So you can actually do employment verification. He has to go fill some stuff out online. They send him a report of what happened. It's like a third party verification system. She talked him through the whole process. He said, okay, great. I'll get all that information. I'll send it over tomorrow. No problems. And I'm thinking, great, like the client just got some bad information. And I was feeling very, very relieved about the situation, because who's going to bluff during that? This guy is the guy that bluffed. The next day, I emailed my client and I said, hey, did he send over that information, the employment data report? And she said, no, but we did receive this. And she forwarded me what was like a 2-page dissertation about why he lied. So he had apparently only worked at that company for 6 months, but had said that he'd been there for the last 2 years, which is a pretty big discrepancy.
Wow.
He lied to the recruiter. He lied to the hiring manager. He lied to HR. He lied on his paperwork. He lied on everything. So, listen, this is when we start talking about desperation and what happens here. So, this guy had a couple other short stints on his resume already. Then this last company he was laid off at, and I don't know all of the details right now, but I would assume it was for underperforming because it was a sales role. And even if it wasn't, if it was a layoff or whatever, had he been honest, there's still a chance that they would have brought him on, right? Oh, yeah. Had he just said, hey, this is what's going on. I was laid off. I'm not working. We could have helped to coach him and frame that for the client. So not only did he lie about this and he bluffs, and even to us to the very, very last second, he then proceeds to leave a voicemail for the CEO of the company who he has never spoken with.
No. Oh my Lord.
The voicemail was forwarded to me, which I poured a glass of wine before hitting play. But essentially it said, listen, I don't think that this act, yes, I lied. I don't think that should reflect on my character. Which I don't know what else would reflect on your character if that doesn't. Yeah. Because I am a good Christian man. Now listen, I am not here to talk about religion. I am not here to talk about what is right and what is not right. But all I know about, or one thing I know for certain about any religion, is that your actions should speak louder than your words. And if this action does not scream into or whatever.
Let's break that down on a couple levels, right? Like, one, you lied. Two, like, instead of just coming out when you were found out and just being like, I own up to it, like, I lied about it, and then taking it, whatever the consequences were, you instead, panic mode, sent a voicemail to the person who has no stake in your employment, like, who really does not care. And if anything, it's his very first impression of you. So it's like, your first impression of this person is now, I lied, I'm sorry, I don't know you. Like, it's just like,
well, I lied, I'm sorry, but also you should really understand why I'm lying, because I'm a good Christian person, so I have the ability to do. I don't know, like using your faith to say this is who I am without taking any action to support that is ridiculous. And then the voicemail was pretty long, but I'll just highlight that was the best part of it for sure. And then right up there was, I just want you to know, no one told me to call you. I didn't run it by anybody. In fact, I just thought to call you just a few minutes ago. And I was like, okay, so also you're impulsive.
Extremely
and you have
impulsive.
No forethought. Yeah.
Extremely impulsive. Wow.
Needless to say, that offer was rescinded. And so what is, I can joke about it and it's funny. Like, look, I feel bad for somebody who feels like they're in a position where they have to lie to get a job. That is an awful position to be in. Yeah. But if you are the kind of person who lies outright to many, many people and wastes their time, as opposed to being upfront and honest, my guess is that this is not the first time you've done something like this, and there's a pattern of this in your life.
Absolutely. And then, like, I mean, even on the client side, right? Like, we deal with clients all the time who just won't tell us the real deal on their
Yeah.
budget, or like, when we see a candidate, we're willing to give him whatever he needs, but like that's not really true. Like I can't, and I'll give you one of my stories. I had a client that we were like, just before this all happened, we were ready to present an offer. They had told me a budget of 120. I got him a 120 candidate. And like we had gone through like, what's the cash comp, what's the salary, what's the base, what's the bonus, all that stuff, right? So like all the details behind it. And then we get there, and I'd given them the information on the candidate up front, as well as giving them information on the market, and was like, you're still paying $20,000 less than what you should, even with the bonus, right? So we get there, we get the guy in, 120 candidate. Perfect. This should be a done deal. Candidate was ready to go, sold. Ultimately, they go, well, he's good, but he's not perfect. So we don't want to give him we want to give him 110K base with, a 10K bonus. And I'm like, he's already making that. Like, he's not going to accept it. So it's just one of those frustrating things where like we've gone through the whole entire technical screening. They knew where he was, and then only until the last minute did they go, oh, we wanted to see if we really liked him, and then we're going to present him this offer, instead of giving me the transparency to be like, hey, candidate, like I don't think you should go in this third round because they're not going to present you 120, they're going to present you 110. Like
well, and I think that's a case too where, and I'm pretty open and honest with clients about this. If you only have your best interest in mind and you're not thinking about the interest of the candidate, like look, before all this started, we were in a really, really tight market, and clients need to understand that they are not the only company that's competing for that talent. And yes, you should be evaluating them to see if they're going to add to your organization. But guess what? Nobody is perfect, just like no client is perfect. If they don't see what they're going to get out of an opportunity, why would they come work for your company, right? So are you helping them understand, like, this is the impact that you're going to make? Here's the intrinsic reward, here's the financial reward, here's the career growth. If you don't have those three things, I mean, a stool with two legs will stand, but not for very long, right? And a stool with one is going to fall over. So I think it's important and you do a great job of this, I know you do, of informing your clients about what's going on in the market. But honestly, regardless of market, be a human being.
Yeah.
Right. And I tell clients this all the time, like $10,000 to you is not nearly as big of a deal as it is to a candidate. Yeah. So if it's going to take an extra $5,000 or $10,000 on a low level role, show that candidate how serious you are about them, and show them that you really want them as a part of your team, or put it in a bonus or whatever. And on a larger level candidate, I'm dealing with this right now. I have an amazing candidate for essentially it's a GM position for a very late stage venture company. This is an area of the business that they have said to me, this is the number one growth area for our business. We are behind. We need to grow this segment of our business. We see a massive amount of revenue coming in. And so now we're getting to the negotiation stage with this candidate. And he has done the exact thing that they need them to do. Like, it is, I mean, I couldn't be more perfect, right? And so what I've said to them is, I can give you numbers all day long, right? But what you need to show, there's two things you have to decide. Like, what impact will this person have on your business? And this specific person, is it an incremental difference or an exponential difference between him and the runner-up, right? If it's exponential, or even if it's significant, you need to show them that with a package. Because just giving somebody something like that is standard market or whatever it is, because I have a great relationship, I know what's important to him. He's been very honest with me. I've been very honest with the candidate. The equity stake is extremely important to him, and so a package in general really should show a candidate how excited a company is about them, and should make them feel good. And this is why, as recruiters, we try to do all of the negotiating before the offer comes out. And I think that's something that's a little bit misunderstood in our industry by clients and by candidates.
Yeah.
Show me the offer. Yeah. So doing all the negotiating before what it allows it to do is it's a smooth transition into the company, right? The candidate knows I'm already going in and going to bat for them. So our relationship is strong. They've been open with me about what they need and what they want. I've been honest with them about, here's how you did during the interview process. If you go in there and you kick this thing's ass and you impress every single person, it's going to be a lot easier for us to negotiate a strong package for you. If I let them know and I'm honest and say, listen, you did well. There are other candidates who also did well. You know, you have some room for growth here and here. So just understand that the package may not come in as strong as you'd hoped. But regardless of all of the work that goes into it on both sides, when a candidate gets the offer and can accept on that first go, instead of having to go back and forth and negotiate after an offer comes out, they feel so much better. The client feels so much better. It's like you've been dating, you know, and somebody, you decide that you want to propose to your significant other and they say, well, I don't know, can you get me a bigger diamond? Or I don't know, like I need to talk to these other people who might propose to me. Being able to get a yes on the first go, I find makes for a much happier relationship on day one.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of that, again, and to reference it back to dating, comes back to what we've been talking about this entire time, which is transparency. Like, the more honest you are about your situation and where you're at and what you're trying to do and how you see a candidate coming into your role and how it can, you know, really take off for them, I think the better it's going to be. Now, like we talked about this before, where it's like that can become in a form in a base salary, a bonus, some markers or KPIs that once you hit, like you get this big payout. But even in equity, right? Like I can't even express how many times like a company tells you or tells me that they're going to provide equity, and it's like, we don't know, like how much, what does that even mean? Like,
yeah, it's tough. There are a couple things I think that are important for clients to understand. Number one, it is we are a true partner to them, and for all the reasons we talked about before, right? I'm not going to be successful if I can't get you the right person. I'm not just trying to shove a warm body in there. And it is the stereotype that we have to fight against all the time. My kind of MO is I want to improve the image of recruiters with every single conversation that I have on both sides. So having clients understand that this is a partnership and that you are not going to be hucking candidates that are not a great match, right? You're not going to be pushing through the people, that you're going to be honest about the yellow flags that you see. That will help them understand that it's a partnership. But if they're not open with you about true budget, if they're not open with you about feedback, you know, a lot of clients are scared to share feedback because they think you're going to run to the candidate, tell them the feedback so they can fix it for the next go round. And it's, you know, it's important to share the feedback, but not for that reason.
Yeah,
so
it's a marker for me if I'm going to even continue working with a client. If you don't give me feedback, like I'm not going to throw you a resume just so you can like keep going through candidates. Like it doesn't.
Well, and even once they're in process, right? Like I need to know what you like and what you don't like about them so that I'm able to send you better candidates. And also I have to manage the process on the candidate side. And I think that's something that also is very misunderstood. There's a lot of effort and work that goes into the candidate management, managing their expectations. And when we don't have all the information, whether it's about salary, whether it's about options, whether it's about timeline, whether it's about just what did they think of me? Yeah. When we don't have that information, we look like we're not a true partner, and then we're not valuable in the process. So they're not sharing information to me, which means I can't share information to a client. And that full circle, it doesn't happen unless everybody is being honest.
Yeah. And I feel bad for so many internal recruiters who I know are fantastic recruiters that will get the most amazing candidates, and they just can't get their hiring managers on board with giving them real data on what happened, or just trying to get them into a meeting to be like, give me a download of how that interview went. Where do I fix it? Where do I help the next candidate? Like, yeah, it's sad. It's like as an internal recruiter, like I have a lot of feels for a lot of these internal recruiters, especially ones who were put in the position, didn't have experience, and then they're being held to a metric that they can't uphold. It's like, well, what the hell?
Well, and honestly, a lot of those people have been like the first departments to go right now are marketing and recruiting. Yep. So it's been tough. I think you're going to see a lot of people moving to the agency side. So I'm excited about that because I'm building my team currently, but I am also nervous about it for people because the agency side is a very, very different world.
Yeah. Last two questions for you. Where do you see recruiting going from here? Like, what's your 10,000 foot view of recruiting at this point?
You know, I'd say it's more on the side of um, what you were talking about, contracting. I think companies are going to be more open to hiring contractors, which is great. And I think, partnering with an agency who knows how to do contract staffing well is important because it's a very different style of recruiting versus permanent recruiting. You have to have a bench and all those other components. I also think that one thing we run into a lot, especially in the world of startup and tech, is that people, they don't want work from home people. They think that they're not going to be a part of the team. They're not going to add to the culture. I think that this experience is going to really change that. The position I was just talking about with you in this really high level role, originally the person could not be remote. And we are now making an offer to somebody who's going to be probably 80% remote because they're realizing that it's fine. Everybody can get their job done, so those are the two trends that I would say.
Nice.
Contract and work from home.
I agree. The work from home piece is going to be massive. I think we're going to see a massive reduction in staff, like full-time direct hire staff, and people who are in office. It's going to be really sad for the real estate market. WeWorks are going to get destroyed.
Decimated. Decimated.
There's not going to be that many people there. The infrastructure is going to be too great for virtual work.
WeWork was also a disaster in itself. By the way, have you listened to the podcast We Crashed?
No.
It's like a 6-episode series on WeWork. It's incredible.
We gotta watch that.
Yeah.
Definitely suggest that. And then the last one is what advice do you give hiring managers at this point? A lot of these hiring managers are reacting, or executives in general are reacting. We need to let go of staff. We need to drop 30%. We need to figure this out. They're hurting. What's your thoughts?
So 2 pieces. I love bullet points. So the first one is, in this current state, the advice that I give to hiring managers is, now is an opportunity to look at your business. And it's an opportunity to say, like we talked about, what can go contract, what can go work from home, et cetera. But, a lot of the clients that I'm working with are identifying, here are some people that have been underperforming for a while, and we've had them on plan or whatever. Those are the people that are being let go first.
Yes.
And it's not awesome for those people, but I will say that if you're underperforming in a job, it's probably not the right role for you in the first place. Or maybe the company has unrealistic expectations. So you should take that as an opportunity, not as a disadvantage, although it definitely is hard to look at it that way in the moment. But the other thing that I think companies can do is, so aside from looking at, who's underperforming, also what structure makes sense of who's reporting to you. A lot of the clients that I'm talking to right now are looking at the structure of the organization and what's reporting into what, does that make sense, et cetera. In general, my number one piece of advice for clients, Corona or otherwise, is, I'm going to say it again, and I know that this is probably going to be the hashtag of the episode, is it's transparency. And so I mean that with their teams, but I specifically mean it in the hiring and recruiting process. Mm-hmm. Seeing your recruiter as a partner who should have market knowledge, who you can look to for advice. And as a recruiter, you should be looking at yourself as an advisor to your client. 100%. Building that, if they have recruiters that they're working with who are constantly saying, I know this isn't what you want, but take a look anyway, now is the time to stop working with those people and to find people that you can lean on and say, hey, what trends are you seeing? What are your other clients doing? How can we improve the process? If you're a hiring manager and you're looking at 10 resumes for a single role, that's a problem. Your recruiter doesn't understand the rec appropriately. And that means that either they are not doing a great job and that they're not listening to what you're saying, or you're not telling them.
Yep.
So if you can hone that process by creating a trusting, transparent, open, candid relationship, saying, here's exactly what I need. Here's what you're sending me. Here's why that's not working, or as you and I know, a lot of times things change throughout the interview process. They interview somebody and they go, we really like that quality. We want to find that in the next person, whatever. Yep. But letting the recruiter into that process will save you hours and hours and hours of time and lots and lots and lots of money.
Yeah, I tell my clients all the time, don't work with 6 recruiters, work with 2 really good ones, like for your department, right? Like if you like, let us be in competition with each other. That's fine. I don't really care. Like I prefer to be retained because I can have my other person work on that role for you. We can have 2 of our own people working it,
Yeah.
and we'll be in competition because we both want to get paid, right? So, but at the same time though, 2 recruiters max for a department. Like there's no reason to bring on 6 recruiters because then you don't have time to do it. You don't have time to be transparent with your client or with your recruiter and tell them what's going on and take those calls. Like, and then you're getting, like you said, you're fielding 15 resumes a day. At the end of the day, if you have a good recruiter, that resume is gonna hit your desk within the same 24-hour period. Now,
Well, and look, it's also a level of like, I think people need to understand, just like any other relationship that they're in, like things are two-sided. So the level of effort and the level of comfort that you give me that you're actually really a part of this process is the level of effort that we are going to put back. And I'm not the kind of person that likes to, I have other recruiters on my team maybe who haven't been in their careers as long. So they have clients who are super unresponsive and they'll just send a bunch of resumes. And it's like, it's not the kind of relationship that I'm trying to build or, client that I want to cultivate. So the effort that you put in is the effort that you will get back. You spend time explaining what you need and you have realistic expectations. You're going to have 3 resumes or candidates or whatever. You're going to be able to hire the best 1 or 2 of them.
yeah.
As opposed to, well, I'm going to work with 10 people and we're going to, spray and pray. And we're going to look at all of these resumes. Our process is going to be inefficient. We're going to lose good candidates because we're not moving fast enough. We don't have insight into their other activities. There's just so many components. And honestly, transparency and partnership solves every single one of them.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I'll leave you on that. Andrea, thank you so much for your time. You are the best. And if people wanted to get a hold of you and wanted to talk to you, how would they do that?
Well, if you want to see my sourdough bread, I'm on Instagram at Yay How Fun. And it's honestly, they're really, really beautiful pictures right now. No, but if they want to reach me, we'll put it in the show notes. But I'm A Rishmawi at TEEMA Group, and our website is TEEMA Group, TEEM as in Mary A Group.com. I'm working on creating a personal site. Will has been yelling at me for a really long time to do that.
I have. So we'll get you.
And my LinkedIn, and listen, the recruiter's Instagram is just their LinkedIn. So I write articles on LinkedIn all the time, and I'm going to start creating some video content as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. Have a great rest of the day. And you just dropped some value bombs for all our people. I really appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Have a great day. Thanks, Will.
You too.